California wants to exempt LGBT child rapists from sex offender registries. California, the more you say you oppose pedophilia, the more pro-pedo legislation you propose. Your mouths say no, 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 but your eyes say, hey, little fella, I have a present for you in my pocket. Just reach in and get it. I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Screw you, California. This is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're discussing a Maryland library that held a teen LGBT sex ed class that forced parents to wait outside. Plus, Indiana University hosts an extreme sex fest on campus. Spectacular. But we start in California, where lawmakers are working on legislation that literally would exempt some LGBT child rapists from having to register as sex offenders. For our first story today, we're joined by Alex Newman, our international correspondent. Alex, just when you think California can't get any freakier, it does. Lawmakers in California are proposing a bill, an actual bill, that would allow child rapists, if they're LGBTQ, to not have to register as sex offenders. Explain that for us.
I keep saying it. Just when you think California can't get any nuttier, any more ridiculous, somehow they managed to prove you wrong. And so now they've got this legislation. And apparently all the Democrats agree, and even some of the Republicans agree, that if you're a child rapist and you're a homosexual or a transgender or something like that, and there's 10 years or less of age difference, then you shouldn't necessarily have to register on the sex offender registry. So if you're a 24-year-old homosexual raping a 14-year-old boy, we can just leave it up to the nutty California judge to decide whether you really belong in the sex offender registry. And I think it's a good illustration of where the state of California is going.
Well, the scary part about this for me, Alex, is why in the world would you make that discriminatory distinction? So if you happen to be lesbian, bisexual, gay, or transgender, there's a different set of sexual rules for you than if you're homosexual? What would be the I mean, I think I know the answer to this. That's the privileged category, and you boring heterosexual people should be punished. But explain to me what their thinking is to the best of your knowledge.
Yeah, well, as I understand it, they're marketing this actually as a non-discrimination bill because they argue that, hey, you know, a 20-year-old man could theoretically have a relationship with a 17-year-old girl. They might get married, and you know, we wouldn't call that statutory rape. And so why should a 24-year-old homosexual man who rapes a 14-year-old boy be considered a child rapist if the 14-year-old boy consented to it? So it's really very twisted logic, but you know, nobody ever accused California lawmakers of being terribly sensible or logical.
Well, you know, you could get in trouble in California if you have a 17-year-old girl and a 24-year-old man. It's probable that California would not prosecute that all the way, but it's still prosecutable, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it would be up to the discretion of the judge in that case whether they add the person to the sex offender registry. So.
And is there any rhetoric? I mean, they call it non-discrimination, so the implication seems to be that there is a different sexual standards for lesbians, bisexual, gays, and transgender. There seems to be this argument that in that community, the alphabet community, to use the way it's been phrased by Dave Chappelle, the comedian, the alphabet community apparently has greater latitude, or they're more sophisticated, or children who are LGBTQ gay, if they're attracted to adults, we have to give them more leeway to have sex with adults because, you know, they're minorities or victims. If you had to answer this one way, what would be your argument?
Yeah, and that's really what they are arguing. They're saying, you know, we used to think sodomy was bad, and so that's reflected in our laws. But now we know sodomy is just totally fine and totally normal and totally healthy. You know, it's practically the same thing as heterosexual intercourse between a married couple, and so we should update our laws to reflect that. Now, you know, it's important to point out that even one of the key Democrats here has rejected this logic and has said that no, you know, there's no way we're going to do this and practically legalize or at least come close to decriminalizing rape between a grown man and a young boy. But this is where they're going with this. And you know, we've talked about on this show before, Duke, they're now trying to normalize pedophilia in California. So, you know, with each day that passes, they knock down more and more barriers, and that's where this is ultimately headed.
Yeah, this reminds me of the gay marriage debate of 10, 12 years ago when we were told, no, this is just two male or two females who want to marry. They support monogamy. This is not going to become more about about and how dare you suggest that it's a slippery slope, that if we allow two men to marry, that you're going to get polyamory, or that if you get two women to marry, pretty soon you're going to be getting demands for adults to marry children. That would never happen. It's offensive. Here it is. And the argument seems to be, as we said before, that pedophilia is all in the head, right? And that when it comes to people who are already brave enough to be lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, or gay, they have a kind of a greater understanding. They're freer and more open about sex than heterosexual people. So we should give them an entirely separate standard than we do traditional heterosexual people.
Yeah, and that's where this is going. I mean, if you just project the lines forward, you see that this is going very, very nasty places. And as we all know, what happens in California eventually spreads out across the country. This is not going to end well.
No, and I think in a court of law, if California passed this law and then it went to a federal court, and the premise of the lawsuit was not, do they have the right to do this in California? The premise of the lawsuit was, is it discriminatory to allow LGBTQ people to have greater discretion and not heterosexual people? I almost 100% guarantee you that they would find that it was illegal to discriminate against heterosexual people, and the law would have to be broadened to apply to heterosexual rapists of younger children as well.
Yep, no doubt about it.
Now, before I sign off here, let's be clear. You and I are using the term rape, right? Because we understand that when an adult has sex with a child, that child can't consent. But they wouldn't call it rape, right? So when we say child rapist, we should step back for a second and just point something else out. If you have a 9-year-old boy under this law, possibly, and a 19-year-old man, or a 21-year-old man and an 11-year-old boy, and they have sex together, it's because it's not rape, because it's consensual. Then the 11-year-old boy, we are conferring the ability to consent on young people if a judge agrees with that.
Exactly. And, you know, we don't let 14-year-old or 12-year-old or 15-year-old children vote. We don't let them smoke. We don't let them drive. We don't let them, serve in the military. We don't let them buy weapons. And suddenly we're saying it's okay for them to consent to have potentially, life-destroying sexual activities with an adult. It's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely sick. But I really do think it offers a lot of insight into what's going on in the minds of California's legislators and the special interest groups that are moving all of this forward.
Well, and look, if we allow a 5 or 7-year-old to determine its own gender, even to the point of having hormone therapy, why can't they then, if they can choose to alter their bodies, they can choose to reject their biological gender and sex and become, through even surgery in some cases, somebody else at the age of 13 or 14, well, then why can't they pick who they have sex with, right? This is going to end very badly, as you say. And just because there are a couple Democrats now who find this outrageous, it's California. And sooner or later, you're going to shame anybody who has this idea into voting the way you want them to. It's a disgusting story, Alex, and it's only going to get worse. All we can do is continue to sound the alarm, and you do it as well as anybody. Thanks for joining us today.
From the California cesspool all across the nation, we're going to go to Maryland, where a library is having a teen-only, and they really stress teen-only, LGBT class, so parents aren't even allowed in. This was actually hosted at St. Mary's County Library, Lexington, part of the Lexington Park Library System, and they hosted, it's called the Straight Talk Sex Ed for Teens with Bianca Palmisano. And this Bianca runs the Intimate Health Consulting, and parents were not allowed to be in the room. This is stressed heavily for this entire event that they had.
You're holding these intimate seminars for teenagers, and in some cases preteens, and you're telling parents, stay out. You're not allowed to come in. We're going to do this on the public dime, and we're going to tell the actual legal guardians and parents of these kids that you got to stay outside.
Yeah, and in the event description, it actually talks about, they're going to talk about birth control, lubricants, STI testing, all this other stuff. And they're going to defend themselves by saying, well, you had to get parental consent. But at the same time, it's for teens only, and by registering your child, you're agreeing to this format. This is all in the description. It says parents are welcome to wait in the general library areas or in the other room where we will be putting on a program about the importance of science-based LGBTQIA plus inclusive sex ed.
Yeah, if it's all science-based, the good news is it should only last about 30 seconds with this transgender nonsense. But again, and if you're one of those woke-tard parents who actually signs your kid up for this, then wouldn't you be the kind of parent you'd want inside? I mean, if you're the woke tard who says, I'm going to expose my kid to this kind of anti-science, fake scientific worldview, starring Bianca, right? If you're going to do that, why couldn't you let them in? I guarantee you, in most cases, they're probably more woke than the students are.
This is true. And just so everyone knows, in addition to Bianca, this was also hosted by the Southern Maryland Area Secular Humanists, the Washington Area Secular Humanists, and the, well, PFLAG of Leonardtown, which is the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays.
Yeah, let's keep reminding you that what is so galling about what's happening in your public schools, and now apparently your public libraries have decided now they are going to partner with your public schools to do all of this kind of education, regardless of what mom and dad think in most instances, and secularism, right? Notice how you scratch the surface of this stuff, you find politics, you find socialism, you find Marxism, you find all of this radical re-engineering of the country that drives this. It has nothing to do with equality, has nothing to do with informing kids about sexual choices. It's about remaking the entire ethos and subculture of the American society. They're undoing the constitutional republic very definitively, and they're trying to make a brave new world here by pulling apart everything that and you start with things like gender, right? What we have known about humankind for forever, as long as there have been people, we are now undermining them, and we're calling it as this Bianca does. We're calling it science. Right? We're pretending that biological sex and gender are meaningless.
And just like you said with Brave New World, what they're trying to do is create and mold the perfect little humanoids in their own viewpoint. And this Bianca says it. Personally, I'm excited to nurture the next generation of sex educators. I believe sex ed is best received by young people when it's delivered by young people with whom they can talk openly. That means it's crucial to make sure our peer educators have the teaching techniques and medically accurate information available to them. They actually had a junior in high school, this kid named Orion, who's a junior at a prep school, come in to be the peer so that the kids could feel comfortable when they learn about this sex ed. But if you couldn't make it, if you had something else going on, maybe soccer practice or something, they did meet at the Pax River Ale House in Lexington after for a post-sex ed class that everyone was invited to.
At a beer house.
Ale house,
So
yes.
these kids aren't allowed to drink,
but
they can be lectured by this half-wit about, and I love the way she uses the word, what exactly is the nature of Bianca, by the way? Born... Do we know off the top of our head?
Look at the image and you judge for yourself.
I just love the idea that I'm going to assume, nurtures. Right? This is what nurturing has become. This is what motherhood is, right? This is the surrogate motherhood of the 21st century, right? Where bureaucrats and unelected officials and people who have their own secular gender inclusive health clubs now, these initiation groups like Bianca, come to your school, come to your public library, and you wonder who's paying them, right? The idea that all of this doesn't have other salient rewards too is stupid. And why are all these special interests getting this kind of access to our kids? When did our public libraries now become adjuncts, become partners in the gender revolution? What does any of that have to do with being a librarian? And I promise you, if you had done something similar for, Donald Trump or a pro-life cause, guarantee you they would not be hosting a pro-life event on a library that excluded parents from attending it. Never in a million years would a public library do that.
Well, we know where a pro-life event would be in the state of Indiana, where Vice President Mike Pence is from. But I would like to ask you, is it now go Hoosiers or go Hooters? Because at the Indiana University campus, they held the 4th annual Sex Fest recently, and it obviously is all about sex and sexuality. So Sex Fest is partnered with Cupcakes and Condoms, which is a recurring sexual health fair at the Indiana Memorial Union. Attendees can receive free cupcakes, contraceptives, and other prizes.
After this made national news, campus reform, it was canceled. And maybe it was canceled.
The final day was canceled.
Because of this clip. You kind of start gauging where you're at. In the first place, could it be that on a university campus you have a woman strapped to a crucifix, a kind of cross, right? You have a woman strapped to a cross. This is hashtag #MeTooUniversity right now. You've got a female in her underwear strapped to a cross where she's getting beaten with a ruler by a big bald man in front of everybody. Could that have something, do you think, to do with the idea of patriarchy, the idea of the oppression of women. How in the world? I couldn't leave. If they were smart, they'd have put the big bald man on the cross.
See,
and they would have had some preteen with a Hello Kitty ruler whacking his backside. That at least would have gotten you around the whole, men beating women in public sort of thing.
It would have. But according to them, the reason they canceled that final day was that the staff who were overseeing the events received credible information about a planned disruption, prompting the cancellation in the interest of safety.
The idea that you're going to cancel this because of a potential disruption is nonsense. You canceled this because it was giving a great big black eye, or should I say, a big purple butt cheek to your university.
Maybe two there.
Two.
In the interest of safety, because what they were doing was clearly safe.
Yes. Well, I'm sure the ruler had been sanitized.
This is true. Some of the other events that they had was a voguing showcase.
Oh, jeez. Was this naked voguing?
Possibly. They had combined, pantomiming and fashion poses, and more of that comes from the 1980s Harlem ballroom scene, which is primarily a Black and Latino LGBTQ community. So basically, think about Madonna. They had Madonna there. And then they had a licensed marriage and family therapist who kicked off a panel that was called Kick Off to Kink. And they also had a kink workshop.
Yeah, and they had... what was on the tables, Katie?
Oh.
On the tables, you had whips, paddles, dildos, and other sexual objects. One table contained a flyer that listed different types of nipple toys. Nipple toys, which included a clothespin, a nipple pump, a nipple lasso, a magnetic clamp, a adjustable clamp, a clover clamp, a nipple tweezer, and... hand. Okay,
all for the low, low price of your soul. This is just, wow, so much going on. And don't worry, Mom and Dad. Of course, the event is being funded by the university.
Which means it's being funded, Mom and Dad, by your tuition money.
Well, and largely some grants, but also the student organizations, which are directly funded by the students.
Grants. I wonder if those grants were from the secular research organization that's funding Maryland Cupcakes and Condoms.
We will have to.
And I would be very surprised if Bianca didn't have her grubby little female man hand in all of this as well.
This is true. But, when we used to talk about things like whips, paddles, and all that other stuff, we used to think of maybe a certain rap artist and being a little...
Are you going R. Kelly on me?
Not R. Oh, do not watch R. Kelly.
I must point out, too, that this is the same group of liberals who paddling your kid or putting your kid over the knee or spanking your kid is child abuse, right? But if your kid is 18 and the guy spanking her is some big bald dude in a thong, suddenly it's sex play, right? Ugh. So to use disciplinary tools for discipline is vicious and wicked. To use disciplinary tools to titillate somebody, that apparently is the height of cool. So I don't know why Indiana canceled it, other than the fact that who's your daddy, Indiana? Who's your daddy? See what I did there?
I see what you
did there.
Who's
your daddy, Indiana?
That's very bookended. All right. Well,
I was born in a kinky town. All my friends live in kinky towns.
Are you going to die in that same kinky town?
Somebody better.
All right. Kanye has been preaching. What's he been preaching about, Dr. Duke?
Kanye's been preaching to kids. Look, you got 12,000 students, 12,000 kids who showed up to hear a Christian concert with Kanye West. I got to tell you, right now, this is the face of evangelicalness in the future. That you got somebody with the cultural weight, the kind of street cred of Kanye. This is the same Kanye West that 14 years ago actually portrayed himself as the crucified Christ in an act of sacrilege on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. Here we are, fast forward 14 years, and now he is, by all accounts, a seriously dedicated recommitment to Christ. He has been born again, he has embraced Christ as his Lord and Savior, and he is using that tremendous cultural clout he has to minister to kids. Where else are you going to get 12,000 kids to show up? And remarkably, about 200 of these kids immediately committed their lives to Christ after the concert. Pretty remarkable, actually.
Yeah, here's a little bit of the concert.
So here go my single dog, radio nieces. They can rap about anything except for Jesus. That means guns, sex, lies, videotape. But if I talk about God, my record won't get played.
Yep, and I mentioned that the 200 people, 200 students dedicated their lives to Christ as Kanye West pastor Adam Tyson said a blessing over them. West closed out the service with a rendition of his 2005 smash hit, Jesus Walks. Scott Dawson, the founder of Scott Dawson Evangelistic Association and the one who planned the event in association with the iconic singer, told the Christian Post that the faithful need not be skeptical of Kanye West's faith, citing the conversion of St. Paul. This is the road to Damascus moment, right? And so, you know, as much as I have little interest in rap culture, little interest, I suppose, in the kind of cult of personality that often goes into this. I mean, you think about how the traditional church has failed across the board to make Christ interesting or relevant to kids, to young people. Along comes Kanye, and in the space of 6 months, he's done more for kids of a certain age group. This young, what is post-millennial? Not millennial, they're called Gen X. Is that what they call them? Gen what?
You're a Gen X.
I'm Gen, what do they call them?
Z.
Gen?
Or Z.
Z, just Z? Gen Z.
Generation
Gen Z, thank you. Right, Gen Z, I'm sorry. Gen Z, Kanye's done more for preserving Christianity to Gen Z than pretty much every church in the entire country has done so far.
I agree. And when you think about it, remember when there was 6 months ago, maybe, I don't remember when this was, the Beyonce service, and it was Beyonce's music, whereas here it's Kanye West doing Christian music as well. What was kind of, I don't know, remarkable in a sense with this service is the fact that West definitely didn't make it about him. And
no.
It always it's always been Kanye West, and it's always about him, and he will admit that now. Now he says, I believe Jesus died for my sins. There was a time when the devil had me. And he says, do you know the good news? Jesus can save a wretch like me. I stretch my hands to you, Father, I stretch. And during the concert itself, he was in the gray robes, just like everyone else in the choir. He wasn't out front and center. He was mixed in just with everyone else. And that very much so made it about Jesus and not about him.
And let's make an example of this to all the mega churches out there. Let's make an example of this. Those of you who are compromising the soul of Christianity to welcome everybody, including people who do not share Christian values, people who reject Christian orthodoxy, people who do not believe in the premises of the Bible. That's not what Christianity is. Christianity is what Kanye is doing here. Bring Christ to those who do not know him in the most immediate way possible. And so in that sense, I have to concede that he's as much an apostle today as anybody else you're going to find, and certainly more than you get out of that wicked Vatican with its goofy fake pope, or American Christianity, right? With the televangelists who are singing the praises of God while signing the backs of your checks with the other hand. The good news about Kanye is he doesn't need your money. He doesn't need another plane. Kanye doesn't need another mansion. So in that regard, there's more authenticity here as well, because the money isn't what this is about.
He's definitely humbled himself to his Lord. All right, that is going to do it for this Monday's show. If you liked the episode, please help us out by sharing the Dr. Duke Show. It is the fastest way for others to stay educated on what we're talking about every day.
If you're a fan of the show and you have a business, consider advertising with us. Visit freedomproject.com/advertise. That's freedomproject.com/advertise. If you advertise with us, Katie and I will come up with a song parody, to sing for you on the air. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.